Some families are bound by love, others by something far darker. Behind closed doors and shared bloodlines, these brothers didn't just grow up together, they fed each other's wickedness. What began as a bond of trust twisted into a partnership of terror, leaving a trail of fear, deception, and death. Odd! These aren't just criminals, they're siblings who turn their own blood ties into weapons. And their story proves one chilling truth: sometimes the person you should fear most shares your last name. Let's begin. What if the threat didn't come from a stranger in the dark, but from two brothers who smiled, planned, and killed together? Evil doesn't always work alone. Sometimes it has a sibling. From birth, they shared everything: meals, secrets, even their darkest urges. There wasn't just one disturbed mind in this story. There were two, linked by DNA, powered by blood, and driven by a hunger most people can't even comprehend. It didn't start with murder. It never does. It started quietly. Subtle signs, a strange fascination with pain, a disturbing lack of remorse. Small acts of cruelty that most families brushed aside as boys being boys. But those warning signs, they weren't random. They were rehearsals. The brothers learned early one could hide the crime, the other could create the opportunity. And together, they were unstoppable. They didn't argue. They strategized. They didn't panic. They prepared. And when they finally crossed the line, they didn't look back. Imagine two minds working as one, calculating, precise, fearless. While most killers act alone and make mistakes, these brothers had an advantage no police training or forensic team could anticipate. They trusted each other completely. Their alibis were airtight, their timing surgical, their motives buried beneath layers of manipulation and lies. Authorities suspected something was wrong, but suspicion means nothing without proof. And proof is hard to find when there are two monsters cleaning up each other's crimes. Witnesses recalled how charming they seemed, how normal their lives appeared: a shared home, shared routines, shared silence. No one saw the late-night whispers, the coded looks, the unspoken agreements. They blended in perfectly. No one realized the truth until it was too late. Victims disappeared without patterns. Evidence vanished with vanishing. Each crime felt detached, isolated, random, because that's exactly how the brothers wanted it to look. What seemed like coincidence was coordination. Investigators chased shadows, family members defended them, neighbors ignored the uneasy feeling they couldn't put into words. And all the while, the brothers kept moving, kept planning, kept feeding the darkness that tied them together more tightly than any bond of love ever could. But here's what makes this story different. This isn't about two troubled siblings who influenced each other. This is about two men who perfected evil through cooperation. They didn't just commit horrific acts, they inspired each other to go further. When one hesitated, the other pushed. When one grew reckless, the other covered. Their crimes weren't impulsive, they were choreographed, step by step. Body. How do you stop something like that? How do you catch a killer when his brother erases the trail? By the time the truth surfaced, the damage was irreversible. Investigators would uncover secrets that didn't just horrify communities, they shook entire regions. Journalists struggled to piece together the scale of what these brothers had done. Even seasoned detectives described their case with one word: unnatural. And as their story unfolded, one chilling realization emerged. This wasn't a partnership of convenience. It was a pact. A pact sealed in childhood, shaped by manipulation, strengthened through violence, and executed with a level of coordination that defied everything investigators thought they knew about criminal psychology. So ask yourself this: how many lives could have been saved if someone had noticed the signs earlier? If anyone had believed the rumors? If the world had understood that evil doesn't always stand alone, sometimes it stands side by side. And in this case, these weren't just killers. They were brothers, the most dangerous kind. Stay with me, because their story, it only gets darker from here. Long before their names were whispered in fear, they were just two boys living under the same roof. To anyone passing by, the Miller household looked painfully ordinary. A modest home on a quiet street, a father who worked long shifts at a factory, a mother who went to church every Sunday and baked pies for neighbors in the fall. From the outside, it was a picture of stability. One of those families you wouldn't look at twice. The brothers, Daniel and Michael, were only 2 years apart. They walked to school together. They ate at the same dinner table. They shared a bedroom for most of their childhood. At family events, relatives would smile and tell their parents how lucky they were to have sons who got along so well. People assumed their bond was sweet, normal, protective. They had no idea. Daniel, the older one, was quiet as a child. Not shy, just observant. He rarely got in trouble, rarely raised his voice. Teachers described him as immature for his age, a boy who spoke only when necessary. He had a way of staring at people that made some adults uncomfortable, but they brushed it off. Kids were strange sometimes. They grow out of it, right? Michael, on the other hand, was the charismatic one, smiling, chatty. He could talk his way out of almost anything. If Daniel was the shadow, Michael was the light everyone noticed. He was the kid who could charm a teacher, calm an argument, and make friends in minutes. Parents loved him. Girls trusted him. Neighbors swore he'd do something big one day, and in a way, he did. Growing up, their lives weren't free of trouble. Their father was strict, military-minded. Emotions weren't discussed. They were dismissed. Mistakes had consequences. Silence was safer than honesty. Their mother tried to soften the edges of the home, but she was tired, stretched thin, greedy. Some evenings, she'd sit at the kitchen table staring at nothing like she'd forgotten where she was. Daniel learned early to keep secrets. Michael learned how to hide them in plain sight. As teenagers, they were inseparable. Not in the way most siblings drift together out of convenience. This was calculated, coordinated. They understood each other with frightening clarity. A look, a pause, a lie told without hesitation. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. There were incidents, small, quiet moments that most people didn't hear about. A neighbor's dog found injured in their backyard. A classmate who stopped coming to school after a cruel prank no one could trace. The boys were questioned once, but nothing stuck. They were polite, composed, helpful. No one could ever prove they had anything to do with it, but some people wondered. At night they'd walk the neighborhood long after others slept. Streetlights flickering above them, their voices low, their footsteps steady. Some nights they didn't speak at all. They just moved in silence, like they were practicing something. Years passed. Daniel got a job at an auto shop. Michael drifted between part-time work and odd jobs, always smiling, always convincing people he was figuring things out. They lived together longer than most siblings their age, and no one questioned it. It was easier that way. Easier to plan. Easier to hide. There was no single moment when everything changed. No dramatic turning point. Darkness doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it seeps in slowly, quietly, unnoticed. And then someone crossed their path. Someone who trusted them. Someone who didn't see the warning signs. Someone who would become the beginning of everything that followed. Her name was Emily Carter. She lived only a few blocks away and had known Michael casually through a mutual friend. She was kind, steady, the kind of person who believed the best in people. She wasn't naive, but she didn't expect evil hiding behind familiar faces, eyes. Emily didn't know she had stepped into a story written long before she ever met them. She didn't realize the brothers had already chosen their next move, long before she became part of it. Because to them, she wasn't a friend or a neighbor. She was an opportunity. And once the brothers saw an opportunity, they didn't let it go. What happened next didn't begin with violence. It began with trust. And that was the most dangerous part. Evil rarely arrives with a scream. More often, it whispers first. Before anyone connected the dots, there were moments, small, disturbing incidents that flickered like warning lights no one wanted to see. The first red flag emerged when Daniel was just 12. A neighborhood boy, Jacob, came home with a split lip and tear-filled eyes. He wouldn't say who hurt him. His mother assumed it was a schoolyard scuffle, but the way he avoided the Miller brothers afterward told a different story. Years later, Jacob would admit he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to. Daniel pinning a stray cat to the ground. Michael watching with amusement. They had threatened him to stay silent. He did. Then there was the Halloween incident. A group of kids vandalized a teacher's house with eggs and paint. Police believed it was a prank gone wrong, but some neighbors remembered seeing Daniel and Michael walking the streets late that night. Their clothes were clean, their faces calm, yet one witness recalled Daniel carrying a small bag. Another swore they heard laughter, not playful laughter, but something colder. Nothing was proven. No one was punished. Not long after, the local grocery store reported items disappearing: knives, rope, flashlights, small things people accidentally overlook. A cashier joked that the place was haunted, but one employee remembered Michael hanging around the hardware aisle, smiling like he was just killing time. No one imagined he was collecting tools. The boys were good at one thing: blending in. As teenagers, their behavior shifted in ways people couldn't quite describe. Daniel became even quieter, more calculating. He didn't react when others got angry. He didn't flinch when threatened. There was a blankness in his eyes that unsettled teachers who couldn't explain why they felt uneasy around him. Michael evolved differently. His charm sharpened into something more deliberate. He knew how to make people relax, how to gain trust quickly. He became the type who could talk himself out of anything. Some girls thought he was interesting. Others said something about him felt off, but they couldn't say why. Their father saw cracks he couldn't ignore. Once he found a bird with broken wings in the shed, its feathers scattered like confetti. He confronted the boys, but neither admitted anything. Their blank stares that day would haunt him years later. Another red flag came during a camping trip with relatives. A young cousin wandered too close to the lake and nearly drowned. The adults blamed the slippery rocks and poor supervision. But a witness, just 9 years old at the time, claimed he saw Michael push him. No one listened to a child's voice over the brothers' calm denial. Emily Carter entered their orbit slowly. She met Michael at a small gathering and thought he was quiet but considerate. He remembered things she said. He held doors open. He asked about her work. It felt harmless at first. Then came the favors. Could she give him a ride to pick something up? Could she drop off food for their mom while she was sick? Could she help them move some old furniture out of storage? Each request seemed innocent. Each time Emily said yes. But it wasn't the favors themselves. It was how the brothers used them. They learned her schedule. They knew when she was alone. They knew who she trusted and who she didn't. When Daniel barely spoke, Michael would fill the silence with just enough friendliness to keep her comfortable. Emily never noticed how closely Daniel watched her. She never saw the unspoken conversations between the brothers. She didn't know she was being assessed. Meanwhile, other strange incidents resurfaced in town. A car left abandoned by the river, tires slashed, windows cracked. A housebreak no one reported because nothing was taken. A missing pet found buried in the woods. Someone heard voices out there one night, 2 of them, arguing quietly before walking away in the dark. One neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, once told her husband she found Daniel standing in her backyard at dusk. He said he was just cutting through. She nodded stiffly and shut the door. She never mentioned it again. Every red flag seemed small by itself. Every moment felt isolated. No one stepped back to see the pattern taking shape. 2 brothers, one silent, one smiling, both calculating, and the people around them. Blind to the storm gaining speed. No one knew it yet, but this was only the beginning. They watched her first. Quiet, careful, patient. It began like everything else with the brothers by design. Michael smiled. He made her laugh. He learned her routines. He noted when she left her apartment and when she returned. He asked casual questions. He listened like a friend. Emily thought she'd found someone reliable. Daniel studied from a distance. He mapped exit routes. He timed the lights. He checked door locks. He measured shadows. He watched how long it took neighbors to notice porch lights go out. He counted patrol cars. He never left evidence. He left patterns. They tested small things first. A late-night text asking to borrow a tool. A favor to pick something up. An offer to move fragile boxes. Emily felt needed. She felt trusted. She didn't see the pattern the brothers planned. Not with charts, with habits, with repetition. They rehearsed in plain sight. They practiced alibis. They practiced calm voices. They practiced grief. One rainy afternoon, Michael asked Emily to watch a plant for their mother. He kissed her cheek when she agreed. He left. Later, Daniel parked down the block and watched while Michael crossed Emily's threshold. He lingered until Michael returned, smiling and carrying the plant. No one thought anything of it. They escalated favors into invitations, a barbecue, a movie night, a drive to a nearby trail. They made normal things feel intentional. They isolated subtly, first by suggestion, then by convenience. Emily found herself alone in situations she would have avoided. She laughed it off. She trusted him. She did not notice the small rituals, how Daniel always checked the rearview mirror twice, how Michael paused at intersections as if timing could be measured in breaths. The brothers coordinated like a single organism. When one needed an alibi, the other provided the story. When one needed to be seen at work, the other texted coworkers. They established mutual proofs. They built a web of testimony. They also sowed doubt about Emily's memory. Small contradictions. A misplaced item blamed on her. A story retold differently by Michael that made Emily unsure. She apologized for being forgetful. She began to question her instincts. That was their intention. A dark night came. Wind chewed the trees. Rain pounded windows. The town felt smaller. The brothers moved forward. Daniel arranged things easy to overlook. A missing bolt here. A loose latch there. A small cut on a strap. An overlooked tire pressure. He set up failure points that looked accidental. He prepared exits and dead ends. He tested the locks to see which made the least noise. He checked the phone signals to know when calls might drop. Michael handled the people. Fred. He offered condolences in advance. He made jokes to break awkwardness. He redirected suspicion with charm. He practiced his face for grief. He kept the tone casual. They chose the place with attention. A stretch of road rarely traveled. A bridge with tall grass. A parking lot with one flickering lamp. They knew where help would be slow, with attention. They rehearsed timing down to minutes. A 5-minute walk. A 7-minute drive. A 10-minute window to move. Their clearest advantage was coordination. Two minds dividing tasks, one to mask, one to act, one to distract, one to take control. They timed the coffee, the joke, the pause at the light, tiny human pauses that could hide a lifetime of intent. They planted witnesses who would vouch for them later, a coworker who would say they worked late, a neighbor who would confirm they joined a charity event. Michael befriended people whose testimonies could be summoned if needed. On the day it all came together, everything seemed ordinary. Sunlight. Coffee mugs, small talk, a plan folded into a handshake. Emily said yes to a simple drive. She didn't know the map was a trap. For when they left, the air tasted like rain. The brothers were smiling. Neighbors waved. Emily humored them with a stray laugh. She texted a friend about the day's weather and didn't think twice. No alarms sounded, only the quiet confidence of plans made and rehearsed. Then they moved into position. 8. Step by step, minute by minute, breath by breath, the trap closed. The night they chose didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like a favor. Emily thought she was helping Michael pick something up from an old storage unit he and Daniel were clearing out. He told her it would take 20 minutes, maybe less. She agreed without hesitation. Why wouldn't she? He'd helped her before. He'd never given her a reason to doubt him. Daniel was already there. He stood outside the unit, keys in hand, like he'd just arrived. No tension, no alarms. Just two brothers at the edge of town, cleaning up old junk before the rain returned. The streetlights nearby flickered, casting long shadows over cracked pavement. There were no houses close enough to hear anything, just empty lots, rusted fencing, and the hum of a highway in the distance. Michael walked ahead with Emily while Daniel lagged behind, purposefully letting the silence stretch. The unit's door rattled when it slid open. Emily stepped inside first. The moment she crossed the threshold, everything changed. It wasn't violent at first. It was efficient. Michael distracted her with small talk near the back of the unit while Daniel closed the door behind them. She turned around, confused at the sound of metal slamming shut. Before she could ask a question, the lock clicked. The echo was louder than it should have been. She looked at both of them, waiting for an explanation. Michael's tone shifted. No warmth, no laughter. Just cold certainty. The storage unit wasn't cluttered. They'd cleared it days earlier. The floor was swept. The corners were empty. This wasn't a cleanup job. It was a setup. Emily's voice wavered when she asked what was going on. She tried to smile it off, tried to believe it was a prank or misunderstanding. But Daniel's eyes told the truth first. Blank, unwavering, inhumanly calm. Michael's lies faded faster than she could process. His expression lost its softness, his voice lost its hesitation. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He just spoke with the tone of someone who had already accepted the ending. She ran for the door. Daniel stepped in front of it. No words, just presence. The kind of presence that tells you there's no escape. What followed wasn't chaotic. It was rehearsed. Every movement, every pause, every choice made in advance. Emily wasn't attacked in a frenzy. She was cornered by intent. Michael spoke to her the way someone might speak to a stranger getting too close to a secret. His tone stayed even. He told her not to make it difficult. He told her to be quiet. He told her it would be over soon. She begged because begging is human. She tried to reason because hope doesn't die instantly. She said their names like it would change their minds. It didn't. Daniel didn't speak at all. When the moment came, it was fast, precise, stripped of emotion. Emily's scream never reached beyond the metal walls. The brothers had already prepared what came next. They didn't panic. They didn't argue. They didn't stumble over mistakes. Instead, they moved with the kind of control that chills you more than blood ever could. They wrapped, lifted, carried, wept, lifted. They used tarps they'd bought separately from different stores, gloves from different counties, tools cleaned with alcohol days before. Daniel drove without headlights for part of the route. Michael followed in another car. They had chosen the disposal site weeks in advance, a patch of neglected land near an old service road, mostly used by truckers and hunters passing through. The ground was soft from last week's rain. They dug quickly, working in silence except for ragged breaths and shovels splitting dirt. Michael kept checking his watch. Daniel kept scanning the tree line. When it was done, they covered everything with a precision that didn't look improvised. They scattered fallen branches, relayed dry leaves, tamped down the soil with their boots. No cross, no marker, no hesitation. They burned the tarp and gloves behind an abandoned shed 5 miles away. They tossed the shovels into a river. They washed their hands in silence at a rest stop sink and threw their clothes into separate dumpsters across town. By sunrise, they were home, sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee. The news wouldn't mention Emily's name for 2 more days. She was just a missing at first. Michael texted her phone from his own to make it look like he was checking in. Daniel went to work early just to be seen on schedule. Neighbors waved. They waved back. To anyone else, nothing had changed. But something had, because for the first time, the brothers had killed not out of impulse, but out of flawless collaboration, and they weren't finished. Emily Carter wasn't someone who vanished quietly. When she stopped answering calls, people noticed. Her best friend tried texting her. No response. Her boss assumed she was sick until she missed a shift without warning. By the second day, calls were going straight to voicemail. By day 3, her family filed a missing person report. Detectives visited her apartment first. Her keys were on the counter. Her purse was there. Her car was parked outside. Nothing suggested she packed up or ran away. It looked like she intended to come back. The last person she had been seen with, Michael, he didn't run. He didn't act nervous. He told police she dropped him off near his house and drove away. They asked if he was concerned. He shook his head and said, Emily's responsible. She'll turn up. His tone was casual, too casual. Daniel said even less. He claimed he hadn't seen her in days and acted almost annoyed that detectives showed up to question them both. At first, there wasn't enough to push further. No witnesses. No physical evidence, no confirmed crime, just a disappearance, and 2 men who knew how to look innocent. But Emily's family didn't stay quiet. Her sister gave interviews. Her father contacted reporters. Flyers went up across town. A reward was offered. Detectives started pulling surveillance footage, traffic cameras, street cams, gas station clips. Slowly, a timeline formed. One camera caught Michael getting into Emily's car the evening she vanished. Another showed a second vehicle following close behind. One registered to Daniel. It wasn't proof. But it was a crack. Police brought Michael back in for questioning. This time, his charm faltered. He tried to smile, but his voice wavered. He claimed Daniel had nothing to do with it. That was his mistake, because now both brothers were suspects. Investigators searched their homes, not expecting much. But behind a loose panel in Daniel's shed, they found something he'd missed. Scraps of tarp with faint stains and traces of soil that didn't match the yard. In the trunk of Michael's car, they found fibers that matched Emily's coat. Forensics worked fast. Cell tower data showed both brothers' phones in the same remote area the night Emily vanished, an area neither had any reason to visit. When detectives matched that location to an old service road near the woods, they sent out search teams. 2 days later, they found freshly disturbed ground. The site was crude but deliberate. The soil was compacted. The leaves rearranged. It didn't take long to uncover what was buried there. The silence that followed said more than any scream could. Once the news broke, the brothers didn't speak to each other again. Daniel was arrested at work. He didn't resist. He didn't panic. He simply stared at the officers and held out his hands. Michael was taken in from his mother's house. He tried to talk his way out of the cuffs, but the words sounded empty. During interrogation, neither confessed. Daniel sat motionless, offering nothing. Michael deflected, then stalled, then went silent. But the evidence had multiplied. Tire tracks, phone pings, fibers, soil samples, Emily's fingerprints faintly visible on a storage unit latch Daniel had touched without gloves. Neighbors were stunned. Friends were horrified. But those who'd once felt uneasy around the brothers weren't shocked. They were just finally able to speak. The trial drew crowds. Reporters filled the pews. Emily's family took their seats in the front row every day. Michael tried to look remorseful. He dropped his head. He sighed at the right moments. But his eyes gave him away. Darting, calculating, detached. Daniel didn't pretend. He stared straight ahead. No flinch, no blink, no apology. Witnesses testified. Experts explained forensic links. Detectives laid out the timeline. The prosecution described a partnership built on silence and intent. The jury listened in growing discomfort. When the verdict was read, both brothers showed almost nothing. Michael squeezed his jaw as if angry he'd been caught. Daniel didn't move at all. Even in the courtroom, his face showed no regret. The judge called their actions a cold, coordinated, and without conscience. Both were sentenced to life without parole. But long after the sentence was handed down, one question lingered in the minds of everyone who heard the case. If they hadn't been caught when they were, how many more would there have been? When the cell doors closed behind Daniel and Michael, the world outside exhaled, relieved, but not restored. Justice had arrived, but not in time to save Emily. Not in time to stop the brothers before their secret finally bled into daylight. The town tried to return to normal, but how do you unlearn something like this? How do you walk past the house where they grew up and not wonder what else happened behind those walls? How do you sit across from someone who looks calm, polite, familiar, and not question what they might be capable of? Because the Millers didn't fit the image most people have of killers. They didn't stalk alleys or wear their darkness on their sleeves. They blended in. They were sons, neighbors, co-workers. One smiled, one stayed quiet, and together they hid exactly who they were for years. That's what left people shaken the most. Not the brutality of the crime, but the normalcy of its disguise. Emily's family visits her burial site often. They bring flowers. They whisper things no one else can hear. Her father once said in an interview, "If she'd been taken by a stranger, maybe I could live with it." But evil didn't come from the shadows. It came from people she trusted. The courtroom transcripts, the forensic files, the news documentaries, they all capture the facts. But they can't fully explain the bond that made these brothers so dangerous. Two minds, one intent. One acts, the other hides. One leads, the other finishes. That's not coincidence. That's partnership in its darkest form. Some experts believe Daniel was the architect, that his silence shaped the plan. Others argue Michael was the engine, using charm to disarm and manipulate. But in the end, labels don't matter. What matters is the monstrous synergy that existed between them and how close they came to getting away with it completely. And that's the thought that keeps people awake at night. If Emily hadn't trusted them, would they have moved to someone else? If the soil had been deeper, the tarp burned longer, the camera angles shifted slightly, would anyone have ever found her? Their conviction didn't erase their history. It only stopped their future. Yet even now, neither has spoken about that night. No confession, no apologies, no cooperation. Daniel sits in near total silence. Michael spends his time rehearsing innocence in conversations with prison staff. They don't visit each other. They don't write. Whether or not they speak again doesn't matter. The damage they caused already speaks for them. And so the story lingers, not just as a tale of murder, but as a warning. Evil doesn't always arrive wearing menace. Sometimes it arrives in pairs, in silence, in charm. In the places you least expect and the people you never fear. Think about the last person you trusted without question, the last time you brushed off a gut feeling, the last time someone's behavior felt estranged, but you convinced yourself it was nothing. How do you really know when darkness is standing next to you? Because Emily didn't see it, her friends didn't see it, even police almost missed it. Twice. And if her disappearance hadn't been pushed into the light by people who refused to stay quiet, the brothers might have faded back into the world, ready to strike again. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I want you to really think about it. Do you believe evil is born or made through influence? And is it more terrifying when it hides behind a stranger or when it comes in the form of family? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this remind you just how fragile trust can be, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who follows true crime, and subscribe so you never miss the next case we uncover. Because some stories end in conviction, but others haven't even begun.